Listen closely, because the fiercest conflicts often unfold not in grand arenas, but within the silent exchanges of a single gaze. Before we proceed, allow me to offer a caution. The most significant struggles are frequently waged, not in executive boardrooms or on battlefields, but in those quiet moments when eyes meet, unseen by others. This narrative transcends simple affection and deceit. It is a relentless fight for a family's legacy. Remain with me until the very end. And please, subscribe and tell me your location in the comments below. When you have endured as much as I have, battling through hardship, scarcity, and treachery, you learn to trust your inner voice, even those faint sensations that crawl up your spine like an icy whisper. I sensed it the instant Matthew shared his news. "Grandma, I'm getting married," he declared, his face radiating that distinct glow only a 2-year-old possesses after a 2-month whirlwind romance. He was my very soul, that young man. Always had been. Yet, even as I smiled, something within me tightened. Something ancient, something deep. Brianna Carlisle, a pleasant name, a lovely face. But my life experiences have taught me that beauty frequently carries a hidden cost. Still, I held my tongue. I offered a smile. I gave my congratulations. What other choice did I have? When you deeply care for someone, sometimes you must allow them to learn lessons the hard way. Occasionally, it is the sole path. The wedding rehearsal naturally took place at our estate, our residence, the very emblem of everything I constructed with strenuous effort and sleepless nights, a place where I ensured the floors reflected every detail, where the walls whispered tales of triumph and endurance. I stood there beside Matthew, observing guests arrive in their polished footwear and practiced grins. And then, she entered. Brianna Carlisle, with golden hair, flawless skin, the kind of beauty that captures attention and melts resolve. She smiled at me, broad and stiff, like a doll wound too tightly. She extended her hand. I grasped it. It was cold, like touching stone. "Mrs. Witmore," she uttered, with a tone too saccharine to be genuine. I returned her smile. Because that is what you do when you are Eleanor Witmore. You smile while you prepare your defenses unseen. She was courteous, excessively so. Each response was clipped short. Every glance held the faintest trace of impatience. To her, I was not a person. I was an obstacle, something to be endured until she could bypass me. The rest of the family failed to notice. They rarely do initially. Linda, my daughter, flitted around Brianna like a moth drawn to light, eager to make her feel welcome. Matthew, blinded by affection, missed the subtle flaws. But I did not. I perceived everything. And then came Richard Carlisle. You could perceive him before you saw him. A booming laugh, words flowing out like a gushing tap. He rushed towards me like an old acquaintance, seizing my hand in his 2 clammy palms. "Eleanor, what a delight," he boomed, his teeth gleaming too brightly beneath the chandeliers. I smiled, rigid and unimpressed, as he spoke of business opportunities and lucrative ventures, and how much he respected powerful women such as myself. I had encountered 100 Richards in my lifetime, men who spoke loudly to conceal their financial emptiness, men who charmed the room while secretly planning its plunder. He reeked of desperation, masked by cheap fragrance and false courage. And just like that, my instincts screamed once more. But the evening held one more revelation for me before its conclusion. I observed them near the ballroom's distant corner, away from the clamor, the merriment, the speeches, Brianna and a young man I did not recognize. He was more than merely a guest. He was more than just a friend. An undeniable spark existed between them. The way they stood excessively close, the way she laughed with her entire being, the way his hand brushed her waist with a familiarity not developed in 2 months. I watched them, unnoticed. I watched as Brianna's eyes ignited in a way they never did with Matthew. I watched as that young man, Dylan, they later called him, leaned in, and she leaned right back, as if pulled by an unseen force. No one else perceived it. The music was too loud. The drinks flowed too freely. But I perceived it. Because when you have fought for every single thing you possess, when you have struggled out of dire circumstances, you learn to identify a predator, no matter how appealing its exterior. I stood there, my hands folded precisely, my face a flawless facade of composure. Internally, however, I made a silent pledge. I would recall every glimpse, every hushed word, every falsehood that smile attempted to conceal, because storms do not announce themselves with immediate thunder. Sometimes they approach quietly, and this one had just begun. The days preceding the wedding felt like a burden increasing in weight upon my chest. Everything moved rapidly, too rapidly, yet somehow nothing felt quite right. Matthew approached me one evening, appearing anxious. He sat on the edge of the sofa in my study, intertwining his fingers. I knew something significant troubled him. My grandson, so full of vitality and hope, had always managed to hide his worries behind a cheerful grin. But not this time. "Grandma, I need your assistance," he said, his voice faltering slightly. "I purchased Brianna's wedding gown, but I don't have enough funds to cover it all right now. I put it on the credit card, but I'm a little short. Could you lend me some money to cover the remainder?" I could detect the hesitation in his words, and I understood. He wasn't truly requesting a loan. He was asking me to rescue him from a decision made impulsively. And I had anticipated this. The dress, the wedding, everything about it had been hurried. 2 months. Merely 2 months. No one paused to reflect. No one stopped to breathe. But I could not help him. Not this time. "No, Matthew," I stated, my voice steady yet firm. "A gift is not an obligation. Respect precedes money. You should have considered that before acquiring that dress." He blinked, his eyes wide with astonishment. "What do you mean?" "It's for Brianna's dress." "Grandma, the wedding," I cut him off. "I know its purpose, Matthew, but you should never spend money you lack, especially not for someone who has not earned your confidence." His face reddened with vexation, and for a moment, I glimpsed a faint flash of anger in his eyes, but he did not dispute me. Not then. Instead, he rose, and in a soft voice, he said, "I'll manage it, Grandma." And he departed. It wasn't until the following morning that I realized the repercussions of my choice. Linda burst into my study, her face contorted with rage. "You had no right," she spat, her voice sharp as a razor. "Matthew is doing what he believes is best. And you?" She cut herself short, shaking her head in disbelief. "I cannot believe you would do this to him." I remained silent, observing her pace back and forth, the anger radiating from her. "Do you even care about him?" she demanded. "Or are you too preoccupied pretending you possess all the solutions? You think lecturing him will make him adopt your viewpoint? You're alienating him, Eleanor." I felt the familiar ache in my chest, the discomfort of being misunderstood, but I could not bring myself to regret what I had uttered. Matthew needed to learn. He needed to understand that life wasn't merely about rushing forward with promises and shimmering gowns. It was about comprehending the weight of those commitments. Linda, in her fury, failed to see it. She was too busy embodying the role of the protective mother, defending her cherished son. And now, she was too consumed by her own pain to perceive the truth. "Fine," Linda snapped. "I'll pay for it then. I'll handle everything. But don't for a second imagine this doesn't alter things between us." And just like that, the divide deepened. The boundaries were established. She paid for the dress that very day, settling the full amount without a moment's hesitation. But I realized then that our relationship would never be the same. You cannot erase words once spoken, can you? Once you witness someone's true essence, it does not disappear. Matthew never discussed it with me again. He sought neither my counsel nor my approval. He simply allowed his mother to manage it. He did not grasp what had been lost in that exchange. And Linda, she couldn't look past her anger long enough to understand that I wasn't attempting to harm her son. I was attempting to instruct him. The wedding drew nearer with each passing day, and I could feel the growing distance between myself and the others. Matthew, absorbed in his own world of wedding arrangements and Brianna's demands, did not perceive it. But I did. And I knew something. Something ominous and hushed that they did not. There was more to Brianna's narrative than met the eye. I could sense it deep within my being. The indications were all around me, but for now, I remained silent, because sometimes it is preferable to let them stumble on their own before you compel them to see reality. The wedding day arrived with all the pomp and circumstance one would anticipate for the Witmore name. A grand celebration, a spectacle intended to be memorable. Blossoms, cuisine, laughter, everything enveloped in layers of luxury. This was meant to be one of Matthew's happiest days. But beneath the dazzling exterior, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. I stood in the room's corner, observing the guests gather, their laughter drifting above the sound of clinking champagne flutes. The ballroom gleamed with golden accents, the illumination soft and inviting, precisely as it should be for such a momentous event. Yet something felt amiss. Brianna was a vision in her wedding gown, every detail of her crafted to perfection. Her allure was undeniable, but her eyes never met mine. She gazed past me as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I were a specter from her past for whom she had no time. I watched her circulate from one group of guests to another, her smile perpetually strained, her words courteous but devoid of genuine warmth. She almost seemed to avoid my glance, and I did not miss the chill in her demeanor when she did look my way. A flash of ice that vanished as quickly as it appeared, the kind of ice that pierces directly through you, leaving a lingering cold far longer than it should. Matthew stood beside her, a sparkle in his eye that only a young man deeply in love could possess. I longed to reach out and shake him, to make him see what I saw, but he was too deeply immersed, too blinded by the illusion of affection to perceive the flaws. Richard Carlyle, Brianna's father, epitomized charm. His laughter was boisterous, his words rapid and smooth, crafted to fill any silence. He moved through the crowd like royalty, clasping hands, patting shoulders, and dispensing promises to anyone who would listen about his remarkable new ventures and incredible opportunities that were certain to enrich anyone. I could sense his desperation from across the room, the way he sought approval from anyone who might assist him in ascending the social hierarchy. The type of man who could articulate anything and make you believe it with a smile, the type of man I had learned to mistrust long ago. But it wasn't solely Richard who captured my attention that evening. No, it was Dylan. He stood with Brianna for most of the night, casually, as if he belonged there. His easy laughter and the way he leaned in just a bit too close when he spoke to her were unmistakable if you were truly observing. And I was always observing. They exchanged hushed jokes, shared knowing glances, and moved as if they had always belonged together. Brianna's eyes softened when she looked at him, an expression I had not witnessed when she looked at Matthew. The fondness in their eyes was undeniable, and the way their bodies seemed to naturally align, like magnets, made my stomach clench. I watched them like a predator, noting every subtle gesture, every touch that lingered just a beat too long, every laugh that extended a second too far. I wasn't the only one who saw it, I was certain of it, but no one dared to voice anything, not while everything glittered so brightly. Not while Matthew remained lost in the haze of his wedding day. Not while Linda hovered nearby with her artificial smile, blissfully unaware of the cracks in the foundation beneath their feet. As I stood there, I felt the weight of years of experience pressing upon me, reminding me of the deceptions I had encountered in my life, the kind that always appeared flawless on the surface, but I had been deceived too often to let it pass unheeded. Dylan wasn't merely a friend. He wasn't just a familiar face in the gathering. He was something else, something far more perilous, and I could discern it clearly. The evening progressed, and the formalities unfolded. The speeches, the toasts, the forced gaiety. All of it was a charade, a performance everyone maintained to uphold appearances. But I could see through it all. I mentally recorded every detail, every subtle glance, every minor vocal inflection that betrayed the calm exterior. I would remember it all. Brianna's coolness, Richard's strained smiles, Dylan's intimate nearness. I would remember because one day, sooner than they imagined, everything they had constructed would collapse. And when it did, I would be observing from the sidelines, as composed as ever, knowing I had foreseen it long before anyone else. It is peculiar how life continues to progress, even when you remain tethered to the past. Matthew had been married for only a few weeks when he sat me down, his eyes wide with excitement, and began discussing his grand opportunity. "Grandma, I've found the perfect venture," he announced, practically beaming. I attempted to concentrate, listening as he spoke. But the inner voice, the one that continuously warned me, was already beginning to whisper. It wasn't even his tone or the sparkle in his eyes that troubled me. It was the way he expressed it, his absolute conviction, as if every word were sacred truth, as if nothing could possibly go wrong. "Richard Carlyle," he continued. "He's been educating me about investments, and we're going to pursue this through fractal investments. It's a game changer, Grandma. I'm going to earn substantial money." I nodded, allowing him to articulate his enthusiasm. But internally, my stomach churned. Fractal investments. The name itself felt hollow, like something designed to sound more impressive than its reality. Richard Carlyle, the smooth talker I had observed at the wedding, was now guiding my grandson into a realm I knew nothing about, and my intuition told me it was not the path he believed it to be. "Sounds intriguing," I stated, forcing my lips into a polite smile. "But tell me more about this prospect." Matthew elaborated, detailing every minute aspect of his scheme, as if the mere mention of business and investment had transformed him into an astute professional. I listened, but I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled deep within my chest. The entire situation felt too flawless. Richard Carlyle, a man of more superficiality than substance, suddenly becoming Matthew's mentor, a supposed path to wealth when we both understood how swiftly that world could consume you entirely. It was as if he had enchanted Matthew, making him believe that riches and triumph could be seized with a single leap of faith. The more Matthew spoke, the more I realized how much he trusted Richard, how much he yearned to believe in this so-called opportunity, and I couldn't help but wonder, was this another of Richard's machinations? Was this just another method for him to ingratiate himself with the Witmore name? To infiltrate the family's finances? "Well, I've always had faith in you, Matthew," I said, attempting to maintain a neutral tone. "But you must exercise caution. Sometimes the quickest route to success is the quickest route to ruin." He dismissed it as if I were merely another elderly woman attempting to hinder him. "You have no cause for concern, Grandma. Richard is a genius regarding investments. I'm going to acquire much knowledge, and we're going to build something significant." I smiled again, but this time, it was not a smile of encouragement. It was the kind of smile a person gives when they possess knowledge others lack. I had encountered too many individuals like Richard in my life. Those who promised you the heavens while secretly undermining you. And Matthew, in his youthful optimism, was heading directly for that pitfall, utterly oblivious to the danger beneath his feet. "All right," I said softly. "But just remember, Matthew, not every chance is what it seems." I saw his eyes flicker with impatience, but he did not argue. Instead, he rose, ruffling my hair as he always had as a small child. "I'll be fine, Grandma. Trust me." He departed the room with that same expression of certainty on his face, his aspirations so vast and his demeanor so light that I almost wished I could believe them too. But I did not. I could not. As the door closed behind him, I sat there, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. I was unsure if it was Richard's influence or the allure of easy prosperity that had clouded Matthew's judgment, but regardless, I knew trouble was approaching. It always begins with something that appears too good to be true, doesn't it? And this narrative, this opportunity Matthew was so excited about, it felt too flawless, and I had learned long ago that perfect was merely another term for impending catastrophe. It's peculiar how people disregard warning signs when they prefer not to acknowledge them. How they convince themselves that everything is satisfactory when deep down they know something is amiss. As the weeks passed, I observed Matthew's behavior gradually shift, like the tide creeping in, unnoticed until it's too late. He began liquidating assets, those gifts I had bestowed upon him over the years, items intended to secure his future, to ensure he would never have to endure the struggles I had. At first, I thought it was merely a temporary lapse, a misstep, but it was not. "Grandma, I'm just reinvesting," he would say, his voice cheerful, his eyes bright with the same fervor he'd displayed when he first mentioned fractal investments. "It's all part of the strategy. These are just the new ventures Richard is assisting me with. I'm going to recover everything and more." Each time he spoke like that, something within me grew cold. His words mirrored those I had heard from too many people who had lost everything, who had been enticed by someone promising them the world and leaving them with nothing but empty hands. The first time he sold a piece of property, a small investment I had given him for his 21st birthday, he attempted to reassure me, but I could see it in his eyes. He was frightened. Frightened of failure, frightened of disappointing Richard, and frightened of me. He believed I wouldn't notice. He believed I wouldn't care. But I noticed, and I cared. One evening, after another of Matthew's "I'm just adjusting things" explanations, I found myself seated at the kitchen table with Linda, attempting to make her comprehend what was occurring, trying to make her see how Richard was manipulating events, but she refused to listen. "Eleanor, you're being absurd," she said, rolling her eyes in that characteristic way she always did when she thought I was being too harsh. "Matthew is an adult now. He's making his own choices. You need to allow him to live his life." I sighed, rubbing my temples, trying to summon the patience I so frequently lost when dealing with her. "Linda, I know my son-in-law, and I know Matthew. Richard Carlyle is exploiting him. He's setting him up for something. He's a silver-tongued deceiver, a swindler, and you are too blind to perceive it." Her face flushed, and she crossed her arms defensively. "Don't you dare call Richard a swindler, Eleanor. You don't know him as I do. Then what do you believe this is? This selling off his possessions? This reinvesting in who knows what?" I snapped. "Do you honestly think he's doing this for Matthew's future?" But Linda, as always, had already made up her mind. "You're merely envious. You're jealous of what Matthew is achieving. You've never liked Richard, and now you're blaming him for everything." She stood up, shaking her head. The conversation concluded in her perception. But I was not finished. I looked at her, steady and composed, though rage simmered just beneath the surface. "I am not jealous, Linda. I am afraid, and you should be too, because I have witnessed this before. I have seen men like Richard ruin lives, and now they are doing it to my family, to my grandson." But she would not listen. And Matthew, he was too engrossed in his own world of promises and false hope to perceive what was directly before him. Weeks elapsed, and with each passing day, I observed more fragments of Matthew's life vanish. He rationalized everything, selling off investments, emptying savings, all in the name of advancement and opportunity. The more he trusted Richard, the more he lost himself. And the more I watched, the more I felt as though I was losing him as well. I attempted once more late one night when Matthew visited after one of his meetings with Richard. "Matthew, please heed my words," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You must stop. This is not the correct path." "Richard." He cut me off, eyes wide with vexation. "Grandma, I understand my actions. I am no longer a child. I have a strategy. I am taking charge of my future." "You are being controlled, Matthew," I whispered. "And you don't even perceive it." But he did not hear me. He could not, and I knew deep down that there was nothing more I could utter. I was weary of cautioning them, weary of shouting into an empty space, hoping someone would listen. No one desired to hear the truth. Not Linda, not Matthew. So, I decided to wait. I would wait for the truth to reveal itself because it always did. Lies always catch up, and when they did, I would be there, observing from the periphery, ready to witness the story unfold as it always had. And in that silence, I knew one thing with certainty. The truth was imminent. I simply had to be patient. 3 months. Merely 3 months. That was the duration it took for the perfect illusion to shatter. I had foreseen it. Of course, I had felt it in my very bones, even before Matthew had begun liquidating his assets and entrusting Richard Carlyle. But it did not lessen the impact when the reality struck. The telephone call arrived late one evening, Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting lengthy shadows across the estate, Matthew was seated in the study, reviewing documents, his face illuminated by the desk lamp's glow. He looked up when I answered the phone. His curiosity piqued. I did not speak at first. I merely listened. It was Linda, on the other end, her voice strained, tight. "Mom, you need to sit down. Brianna, she's filed for divorce." I felt the world momentarily pause. The air seemed to thicken, the weight of the news pressing down upon me. Brianna? Matthew's recent wife? 3 months. Not even enough time for a full season to change. I remained silent, my eyes fixed on Matthew's, his confusion, his disbelief etched across his face. Matthew's voice cracked, and I saw panic begin to creep into his eyes. She claims it's incompatibility, Matthew. Linda's voice was distant, but I could detect the underlying bitterness. And she says she wants a division of assets, including your shares in the Witmore company. The words pierced me like a blade. Brianna hadn't simply departed. She was seizing everything she could, and had the audacity to do so under the pretense of a simple divorce. I stood there, my mind racing, assembling the pieces of the puzzle. 3 months was nothing. That was no time at all. Not enough time to truly know someone, let alone conclude a marriage. But that was the scheme, wasn't it? To insinuate herself, to captivate him, to make him fall, and then to pull the rug out from under him once she had everything within her grasp. She had never been in it for affection. She'd been in it for the influence, for access to the Witmore name. I could feel the trap closing around me, around all of us. Matthew attempted to speak again, but his words were jumbled. She can't be serious, right? She can't just... But I had witnessed this narrative unfold too many times. I had heard the identical words, experienced the same heartbreak, watched the same naive optimism disintegrate. Brianna had never cared for him. She had never cared for the family, about anything, except what she could gain. I waited a few more seconds, watching confusion flood his face. Then, I made my resolve. "Matthew," I said softly, my voice firm, "there's something you must understand." He looked at me, his eyes seeking some sort of answer, some comfort. "Brianna has a strategy. She's been manipulating you from the very beginning." He recoiled, the words striking him harder than I anticipated. "Grandma." "No, that's not." "I'm not finished." I cut him off. "You're not perceiving it. She's been collaborating with Richard and Dylan. They've been orchestrating everything, and you've been too blinded by affection to discern it." His face hardened. Anger replaced confusion, but it was too late. The truth was already revealed. "She's demanding everything, Matthew. Your shares, the money, everything. And it won't cease there. They'll continue to pursue more." He did not respond. He lacked the words, but I could see the hurt settling in his eyes, the realization of everything I had been warning him about finally sinking in. I turned away, my heart heavy but determined. "This is not over," I murmured to myself. "Not yet." Within the next few days, I took decisive action. I couldn't wait for Matthew to figure it out independently, not after all the warning signs I'd observed. I engaged an investigator, someone specializing in unearthing hidden truths that no one wished to confront. I instructed the investigator to be thorough. I needed to know every detail about Brianna, Richard, and their associates, their origins, what they had been concealing. I needed to ascertain if there was more, if they were working in concert, or if Brianna had been deceiving Matthew from the outset. It did not take long for the investigator to confirm what my intuition already knew. Brianna's financial history was chaotic. Loans, debts, questionable transactions, everything I'd suspected. And Richard, the supposed luminary of the business world, was no better. There were murmurs of fraudulent agreements, bankruptcies, and dubious investments linked to his name. I felt anger ignite within me. It wasn't merely the betrayal, it was the audacity that they believed they could escape consequences, that they had used my grandson as a pawn to advance their own selfish desires. But now I had them. I possessed everything necessary to bring them down. The trap was laid. And now it was time for them to experience the repercussions of their actions. I had no further patience for waiting. It was time to retaliate. The pieces began to align more swiftly than I could have imagined. Once the investigator I hired delved into the Carlyle family's finances, it became evident that their polished exterior was merely a fragile shell, ready to fracture with the slightest strain. The Carlyle family was financially ruined, and I mean utterly ruined. Their debts were astronomical. Mortgages were past due, businesses were imperiled, judgments accumulated like an impending avalanche. Brianna, it appeared, was not the only one with a history of unsound financial choices. Her father, Richard, had been living a life of costly illusions, investing in the image of prosperity while disregarding the reality of his failing empire. The investigator did not stop there, of course. The deeper he probed, the more disturbing the story became. He uncovered court documents detailing lawsuits, liens, and unpaid loans spanning the previous decade. It was as if the Carlyles had been evading creditors their entire lives, barely staying ahead of the financial tide they themselves had created. But it wasn't solely their monetary troubles that captured my attention. It was something more profound. The connection between Brianna and Dylan began to form clearer patterns. I had observed Dylan during the wedding. Naturally, he was that charming, almost imperceptible figure who blended into the background while always remaining just a bit too close to Brianna. A family acquaintance, they had called him, but it didn't feel right to me. His conduct, his closeness to Brianna, there was more to their relationship than mere friendship. My gut instinct had told me this the entire time. The investigator, examining their connections, began to reach the same conclusions. Dylan wasn't merely a friend. He had deeper ties to Brianna than anyone had realized. The more the detective unearthed, the clearer it became that Dylan had been part of a scheme. And that scheme was not about affection, it was about something far more insidious. A few weeks into the inquiry, the detective discovered that Dylan owned a nightclub situated in an affluent district. Not just any establishment. It was a high-end venue catering to the wealthy and the reckless. The kind of place where the affluent would indulge their darkest urges, paying for discretion and secrecy. This was the moment when the hairs on the back of my neck bristled. It made perfect sense now. Dylan wasn't merely loitering, offering Brianna emotional support. He was collaborating with her. He was collaborating with Richard, and together, they were constructing a web of deception and manipulation that extended far beyond Matthew's simple marriage. They were using him as a pawn. I instructed the investigator to delve deeper, to examine Dylan's life. I needed to know how far back this intricate deception stretched, what kind of dealings Dylan was involved in, and how it intertwined with Brianna. The investigator acted swiftly. He made his way to the nightclub, utilizing his contacts to gain entry unnoticed. He spent hours there, observing, listening, gathering intelligence. He spoke with a few staff members, discreetly inquiring about Dylan's activities. It wasn't long before one employee, a low-level bartender unaware he was being monitored, let something slip. For a modest payment, the bartender provided something invaluable: access to the club's security footage. The investigator did not waste a second. He arranged for the footage to be delivered to him. It arrived a few days later, a stark, black-and-white reminder of the treachery that had been festering just beneath the surface of everything I had trusted. I watched the video in silence. It was a grainy recording from the club's surveillance cameras. Initially, nothing appeared unusual. Just a few patrons in the background, laughing, dancing, and drinking. Then, it sharpened its focus. Brianna, Dylan, alone. The footage displayed them in a secluded corner, concealed from the rest of the crowd. They were laughing together, their bodies closer than I had ever observed them at the wedding. Brianna reached out and touched Dylan's arm, and he leaned in, whispering something into her ear that made her laugh. Then, the moment that stopped my heart, Dylan kissed her. It was swift, but it was undeniable. A kiss that conveyed volumes. I leaned back in my chair, my hands trembling slightly as I processed the images. This was not merely some fleeting instant, some innocent gesture. This was something profound. They were involved, and it was all part of a scheme to dismantle my family. I knew what I had to do. I had to. The time for delay was over. The truth was undeniable, and it was time for me to act. This wasn't merely about a failed marriage or a foolish investment. This was about a calculated, deliberate assault on everything I had striven for. And I would ensure that Brianna, Richard, and Dylan paid for it all. I would make them experience the full weight of the repercussions, because once the truth came to light, there would be no concealment, no excuses, just the ruins of their own making. When the recording arrived, I did not hesitate. I didn't need to view it in its entirety to know what it would unveil. But when I watched it, the irrefutable evidence of Brianna and Dylan's deceit, a torrent of emotions overwhelmed me all at once. Fury, revulsion, satisfaction, and even relief. The video commenced innocuously enough with a few shots of the club. Patrons mingling, drinks flowing, music pulsating through the air. But then it zoomed in on them. Brianna and Dylan in the club's corner, where no one could see them, where they believed no one was watching. The timestamp flickered at the bottom of the display, just 1 week before the wedding, and there they were in the dimly lit corner, laughing, their forms close in a manner far too intimate for a mere acquaintance. My eyes remained fixed on the screen as I witnessed the scene unfold. Brianna touched Dylan's face, a soft, almost tentative movement, her fingers tracing the curve of his jaw as if they had done it countless times before. He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, and the kiss was not just a brief peck. It was deep. It was passionate. It was every confirmation I needed of the truth. They separated for a second, their eyes locking, and then, more whispers, more shared confidences, their hands intertwining as if nothing else mattered. A swift, almost furtive touch across her lower back. Brianna's laughter echoed through the stillness, a sound I hadn't heard from her at the wedding, not once. And then, the most damning part of all, they kissed again. This time longer, with more intensity, more intention, more intimacy. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hands gripping the edge of the desk, as anger surged within me. I had known it. Every fiber of my being had screamed the truth. But now I possessed it in undeniable proof. Brianna and Dylan together, behind Matthew's back, and the worst aspect, she had been manipulating him, pretending to be his ideal bride while she was already constructing her life with Dylan, leading Matthew on as part of her elaborate scheme. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with a dark satisfaction. Now I had caught them. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment, absorbing the gravity of the discovery. A part of me was repulsed by what Brianna had done to my grandson, to our family. But another part, the one that had been dormant for so long, felt vindicated. The trap had been set, and now it was time to activate it. Now, my dear. I whispered softly to the screen. Now you've made your blunder, and it's the last one you'll commit. The video was unambiguous, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Brianna had been unfaithful to Matthew while still wearing the wedding ring, and Dylan, that serpent, had been a willing collaborator in this treachery. I carefully placed the footage into an envelope, sealed it, and took a deep breath. I now possessed everything required, evidence that would demolish her assertions, expose her deceptions, and shift the advantage in our favor. The process was already in motion. Matthew would learn the truth, the full, unpleasant reality, the one that had been hidden beneath Brianna's flawless smile. Beneath the vows she'd made, she had believed she could escape detection. She had believed she could deceive everyone. But now the game had changed, and I was prepared to ensure that Brianna and her accomplices would pay for every transgression. They would not evade this. Not this time. Not. I could feel the tension in my body relaxing. There was no more uncertainty, no more waiting. It was time to present Matthew with the proof, to compel him to see what he had been too blind to acknowledge. Enough of this pretense, I murmured to myself, standing up, feeling the weight of years of experience settle onto my shoulders. It's time to bring it all to an end. The day I presented the evidence to the family lawyers, felt like the calm before a tempest, one I had been preparing to unleash for months. With the footage securely in hand, there was no longer any holding back. It was time to watch Brianna's meticulously constructed world begin to disintegrate. Piece by piece, I entered the legal office with clear intent. The envelope containing the damning video was held tightly against my side. The lawyers were already expecting me. They had been informed, had recognized the warning signs long before I approached them. But this was the moment that would alter everything. I placed the envelope on the desk and slid it towards the lead lawyer, a sharp, methodical man named Greg Cartwright, who had served the Witmore family for years. He looked up at me with a raised eyebrow. "Eleanor, I trust you understand its contents?" he inquired, his tone almost too casual, though I knew better. I nodded slowly, my gaze fixed intently on him. "I know precisely what is in there, Greg. And so will Brianna once you play the video for her." His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the envelope, extracting the disc. He did not need to request further details. He knew exactly what he was about to witness, but I observed the moment he grasped the full extent of the betrayal. The expression in his eyes when he saw the timestamp and the intimacy between Brianna and Dylan, the irrefutable evidence that could not be rationalized away. He turned the disc over in his hands before finally speaking. This is grave. This changes everything." I did not smile, but I felt a profound satisfaction, a quiet sense of vindication that washed over me. The truth was now exposed. Brianna could not refute it. The falsehoods, the manipulation, all of it had been laid bare. Greg immediately began making calls, working swiftly to prepare the legal counter-response. It did not take long for the lawyers to begin discrediting Brianna's claims. The divorce was not about incompatibility or differing life aspirations. No, it was about treachery, and treachery, in the eyes of the law, carried repercussions. We countered every maneuver Brianna's attorneys made with one clear argument. She had violated her marital commitments with Dylan, and that rendered her claims invalid. The video, dated and time-stamped, was undeniable proof. No amount of elaborate rhetoric from her side could alter the facts. Soon, the financial consequences followed. Brianna had been demanding half of everything Matthew owned, but now she faced an arduous struggle. Her claim to his shares in Witmore Enterprises was gone. The supposed community property she believed was hers was no longer. But I was not yet finished. As the legal conflict shifted, I ensured we investigated deeper into Richard Carlisle's financial history. I knew his past was stained, but I had no idea just how much corruption lay beneath the surface. Greg's team began uncovering more than just missed payments and bankruptcies. Richard's entire financial network was a tangled mess of failed ventures, fraudulent transactions, and businesses built on the shifting sands of lies. His attempts to deceive his way into Witmore's favor had been just one component of his broader, dangerous game. His connections to the criminal underworld were more than mere whispers. There were tangible links, documents that tied him to illicit dealings, some of which had already been flagged by authorities. As the inquiries progressed, it became apparent that Richard was deeply entangled. He had been utilizing Brianna's marriage to Matthew as a facade to infiltrate the Witmore circle, all the while pushing his own disastrous financial schemes onto my grandson. It wasn't merely betrayal. It was calculated manipulation. The walls were closing in on Brianna and Richard, and it felt as if the entire world was observing. I could almost hear their false smiles cracking under the strain. I could visualize it all unfolding in my mind. Brianna, so assured in her plan, watching as it all slipped through her grasp. And Richard, always the boisterous one, the charming one, the man who believed he could purchase his way into anything, now cornered, his empire of falsehoods about to crumble under the weight of his own avarice. I leaned back in my chair, watching the pieces fall into place. The sound of lawyers speaking, the quiet rustle of documents, the soft hum of the air conditioning, all of it felt like a symphony to me, because I knew this was only the commencement. Brianna had intended to seize everything from us, my family, my legacy, but now she was losing it all. I felt no pity for her, not in the slightest. She had made her choice. She had chosen to deceive and to destroy, And now she was going to discover just how far the Witmore name could reach when provoked too far. I was not about to permit anyone to take what was mine. Not now. Not ever. The moment Matthew approached me, I knew he had reached his breaking point. The look in his eyes, haunted, bewildered, filled with sorrow, told me everything. The young man who had once been so confident, so eager to prove himself to the world, was now on his knees, gazing at the wreckage of his own decisions. The world he had constructed in his mind, the perfect future with Brianna by his side, had disintegrated before him, leaving nothing but dust and shattered fantasies. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice trembling. I didn't perceive it. I didn't see what was occurring until it was too late. I didn't say anything initially. I allowed him to speak, allowed him to stumble through his words, through his brokenness. "I was so foolish," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I thought I was making the right choices. I thought I was being clever, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what was directly in front of me." The weight of his words settled in the room, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. The kind of silence that resonates louder than any spoken words ever could. I rose slowly, walking towards him, my steps deliberate. I looked at him, truly looked at him. My grandson, the boy I had watched mature, the boy who had always been so keen to conquer the world, and now here he was, vanquished by his own inexperience. "You weren't foolish, Matthew," I stated finally, my voice quiet but firm. "You were oblivious." He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with tears. I was oblivious to everything. To her, to Richard, to Dylan. I couldn't see it. I didn't listen. I didn't listen. I interrupted, my voice hardening. "You didn't listen. No. And now observe the price you are paying." I paused, feeling the gravity of every word, every lesson that had brought me to this juncture. "To love is beautiful," I said, my tone softening slightly, but still carrying that sharp edge. "But to love wisely is better." The words hung between us like a profound truth. He flinched as if they were a blow across his face. But there was no animosity behind them, only the stark reality of the situation. Matthew had been so engrossed in the illusion of love, in the notion of what he believed his life should be, that he had failed to perceive the foundational cracks. He had trusted the wrong individuals, he had believed the deceptions, and now he had to confront the repercussions of that. "I'm so sorry," he said, the words rushing out. "I'm sorry for everything. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. You were correct all along, Grandma. I was too blind to see it." I nodded slowly, my gaze steady. "You weren't the only one, Matthew. We all yearned to believe in the fairy tale. But sometimes the truth isn't what we desire it to be. It's what we require it to be." He looked down, ashamed, his hands trembling. "I don't know how to rectify this. I don't know how to mend what I've done." I sighed deeply, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. "You cannot mend all of it, Matthew. What is broken is broken. But you can learn. You can evolve. That's all we can do in life. Learn from the errors we commit, even if they come at a significant cost." He nodded, swallowing hard. I saw the anguish in his eyes, the anguish of realizing that no matter how much he wished it, he couldn't reverse time. "But you are not alone," I added, my voice gentler now. "The name Witmore signifies something. It signifies strength. It signifies legacy, and I will safeguard that with every fiber of my being. But you, Matthew, you must protect yourself now, and you must protect what remains of your family because that's all we ultimately possess." He looked up at me then, something flickering in his eyes. Perhaps hope. The realization that a path forward still existed, but only if he could relinquish the past. Only if he could comprehend that he wasn't a victim of circumstances. He had allowed himself to be deceived, and now he had to assume responsibility for the predicament he had created. "I'll rectify it, Grandma," he said, his voice firmer now, though I could hear the burden behind it. "I'll make it right. I swear. I said nothing else. I didn't need to. He would have to discover it on his own, just as I had discovered it on my own. Life's lessons were never easy, but they were always essential. Now more than ever, I knew that it wasn't merely about preserving the Witmore name. It was about protecting those who still had the opportunity to learn, and Matthew still had that opportunity. It would demand time, and it would demand more resilience than he realized. But I believed that if he truly desired it, he could become the man he was destined to be. Not the man Brianna or Richard had wished him to be, but the man who could stand independently, strong, capable, and wise enough to perceive the truth. And for that, I would fight. The day I commenced the restructuring of the Witmore legacy was the day I truly recognized how much the world had transformed and how much it still depended on me to preserve what had been established. For decades, I had striven to maintain this family's strength, to hold everything together. But the moment had arrived for a fundamental shift, one that would redefine the future of the Witmore name. I had never believed in arbitrary inheritance. The notion that someone could simply be granted a legacy based solely on lineage was not something I endorsed. It had never been sufficient for me, and after everything that had transpired, I knew it could never be sufficient for the next generation. So I convened with the lawyers, the accountants, the advisors who had served the Witmore estate for years, and I entrusted them with the most crucial task they would ever receive: to fundamentally change everything. The first action we took was to rewrite the wills. Every single one of them. They were no longer about distributing assets or ensuring the correct amount of wealth descended to the appropriate individuals. No, now they were about something far more precious. They were about enduring heritage, moral integrity, and the wisdom that accompanies experience. I sought to ensure that whoever was positioned to inherit the Witmore name, the empire I had fought so diligently to construct, had earned it, truly earned it. No more bestowing power upon the undeserving. No more granting the next generation an automatic pass due to their birthright. I had encountered too many individuals like Brianna, too many who believed that legacy was a mere title, a name, or a bank balance. They thought they could seize what was rightfully another's and claim it as their own without grasping the profound responsibility that came with it. Brianna had believed she could manipulate her way into the family, take what she desired, and depart with a portion of what I had worked so hard to protect. And then there was Matthew, my grandson. He had learned the most painful lesson of all. Love is insufficient. Loyalty and wisdom, those were the essential qualities, and they had to be demonstrated. So, we enacted the modifications. I knew there would be resistance. I knew that Matthew might struggle with the idea that the world he had envisioned for himself, one where everything was presented to him effortlessly, was over, but it was a necessary evolution. I could not permit the Witmore name to fall into unworthy hands, not after all the years of toil, sacrifice, and dedication. The new regulations were straightforward, but they were stringent. Anyone who wished to inherit the Witmore name, the empire, would have to demonstrate 3 attributes: character, loyalty, and wisdom. Character, the bedrock of everything. Without integrity, there was no future. Loyalty to the family, to the heritage. If you failed to grasp that, you did not belong. Wisdom. You could not lead if you did not comprehend the weight of responsibility that came with authority. You had to be capable of perceiving the larger context, making decisions not just for yourself, but for the future of the family and the empire. I knew Matthew would have to prove himself. I was not going to make it simple for him. He would have to show me that he had learned from his missteps, that he wasn't just a naive lover, blindly following someone who had exploited him, that he understood the value of trust and accountability. And if Brianna thought she was still a contender, if she thought she could somehow insinuate herself back into the fold after everything that had transpired, she was gravely mistaken. The rules had changed, and she did not fit into the future I was building. I wasn't undertaking this to punish anyone. I wasn't doing this to complicate life for Matthew, for Linda, or for anyone else. I was doing it because the Witmore legacy held profound meaning. It meant more than mere wealth, more than social standing. It was about responsibility. It was about constructing something that would withstand the test of time. If you lacked the fortitude to bear that burden, then you did not merit it. After everything that had occurred with Brianna, I was more resolute than ever to ensure the Witmore name would endure. I would transmit it, but only to those who truly merited it. The restructuring was complete, the documents signed, the new rules established. I sat in my office that evening, gazing out over the estate, feeling the gravity of the decision I had made. I knew it would be difficult. I knew it would be uncomfortable for some, especially for Matthew, but in my heart, I knew it was the correct course of action. It was no longer about me. It was about the future of the Witmore legacy, and that, my dear, would never be something I bestowed lightly. Now, I murmured to myself, it's time for them to demonstrate their worth. The day I convened the family, I knew it would mark the definitive turning point. The alterations had been made, the regulations had been set, and there would be no retreat. I had dedicated my entire life to building something worth preserving, something worth defending, and I would not allow it to crumble under the weight of misplaced faith and misguided affections. I had summoned Matthew, Linda, and the key members of the Witmore family to my office. It was an intimate assembly. No crowd, no public display, just the individuals who mattered, those who had supported me, or who still needed to prove their worth. As they gathered around the long, polished table, I could perceive the nervous energy in the air. There were questions, naturally, doubts. But I was not there to offer explanations. I was not there to offer comfort or soften the impact. "Sit," I said softly as I took my place at the head of the table. My voice was calm and unwavering, and it did not take long for them to fall silent. They had learned long ago that when Eleanor Witmore spoke, it was not with an expectation of debate. It was a directive. Matthew looked at me, his face still raw from the betrayal, from his own realization of how profoundly he had erred. I saw the guilt in his eyes, the pain of knowing that everything he had constructed in his mind was a falsehood. Linda sat beside him, her expression tight like a woman clinging to the last shred of control she possessed. "I'm certain you all have inquiries," I began, my eyes sweeping across the room. "But this is not a discussion, it is a declaration." I paused for a moment, ensuring every one of them was listening, truly listening. The Witmore name, the empire, this heritage. It is not something you inherit by birthright or because you were born into the correct lineage. It is earned. Every single part of it. You do not request it. You demonstrate you merit it. I allowed that to sink in, the weight of my words pressing into the room like the profound silence between them. Changes have been enacted. The rules have been revised. No more relinquishing what is mine to those who have not demonstrated they can bear the burden. Matthew shifted slightly, but I did not permit him to speak. "Not yet. You will demonstrate your value in ways that truly matter. Character, loyalty, wisdom, those are the only attributes that are now significant. The rest," I stated, my voice cutting through the air like a blade, "is meaningless." Linda's eyes flickered with confusion, then anger, but she remained silent. She did not yet understand. She would not until she witnessed what came next. Those of you who cannot fulfill these criteria, who do not comprehend what it means to carry the Witmore name with distinction, will be left behind. You will possess nothing. No second chances. No. Oh. We made a mistake. This is not a game. I saw Matthew's gaze drop. A mixture of shame and resolve in his eyes. He understood what I was conveying. Despite all the errors he had made, all the suffering he had caused, this was his opportunity. A final opportunity. "Make no error," I continued, locking eyes with each of them in turn. "This family will endure because it is founded on strength and integrity, not because of pity or because we feel sorry for someone who chooses not to rise to the occasion." I leaned forward, my voice lowering but growing even more intense. The words resonated in the room, each one settling like a weight in the silence that ensued. There would be no justifications. There would be no room for failure. Not anymore. If they desired the legacy, they had to prove their worth. No one would be granted anything, not while I still drew breath. I stood up, my back straight, my head held high. I have fought too hard for this family, for this name, for everything that we possess, I stated, my voice unwavering. I've dedicated my life to protecting it, building it, and I will be damned if I allow it to be destroyed by anyone who fails to understand what it means to be a part of this. I looked at each of them one last time. The weight of the years, the struggles, the betrayals, all etched upon my face. I had survived it all, and I had emerged stronger. And now it was their moment. Do what you will with this, I said coldly. But remember, I have no time for anyone who cannot bear this responsibility. If you cannot, then you are not worthy of the Witmore name. Without another word, I turned and exited the room. My footsteps were deliberate, echoing down the hall like a final judgment. I did not look back. I did not need to. As I walked away, I felt the burden of my age, the years that had accumulated behind me, but it was not an encumbrance. It was a shield forged in the fire of all that I had battled for. I had triumphed again, and I would uphold the Witmore name as I always had, with honor. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and share your personal story in the comments. Your perspective matters.